It was inevitable, yet somehow it feels like it jumped out in front of us. First, it was just those little chatbots, a cute little tool, a little gimmick, a toy online. And then suddenly, everybody was talking about chatgpt and other forms of artificial intelligence. Now, writers and creators in Hollywood are going on strike, terrified that they could lose their jobs from this thing, whatever it is. Some are predicting that this is an existential crisis. Elon Musk is warning the world. And there are those out there who think it will usurp humanity itself. What in the world is going on, and what is it? And are humans and our experiences indeed somehow unique in this universe? Well, this is a deep topic, and we're going there. Strap in. Here we go. All right, folks, welcome back to another video of excellence here on the WDW Pro channel. A joy to share our time with you each and every day. And if you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and you can stick it to the algorithms when you click it. We're talking about that notification bell. Joining me for a very deep conversation today is Lauren Connor of thatparkplace.com, Culture Casino of a Casino Somewhere, and the Script Doctor, who is always out there fixing the scripts, except right now because everybody is on strike. Gentlemen, welcome back to the channel.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Good to be here.
Well, we are going to dive into this conversation about something that is at the edge of our ability to understand and perhaps beyond. But I have brought you gentlemen on because I trust that you all have the intellectual prowess that perhaps I do not, and perhaps the audience is hungry for. Let's wade into this discussion, and we'll start with Script Doctor. Script, this has taken over the industry. Writers are seemingly very concerned, rightfully or wrongfully, about artificial intelligence. Can you walk us through why the entertainment industry is responding so strongly, all of a sudden, to this thing that has, for so many decades and perhaps centuries, been relegated to science fiction alone?
I think it has two tiers, could be more, but two tiers so far. The first one is that there's a genuine concern that such a program could be abused. And as such, the abuse, much like with special effects and digital compositing, could basically harm the creative process for people who work in entertainment. The other part is that those that are not talented enough could either find themselves out of a job or find a way to manipulate it enough to take jobs from those that are more talented because they are, cheaper, faster, able to manipulate the algorithm in such a way that it could appease the very mandates that studios are interested in enforcing with regards to what they want to put out publicly.
Yes. Now, gentlemen, feel free to bounce off one another. Don't just use me as a questionnaire here. But I do want to go to Lauren. Lauren, you work extensively in computing systems. I'm curious if this thing follows the trajectory that we normally see out of paradigms such as Moore's Law. Where do you think that artificial intelligence winds up? In other words, in 3 years, it probably isn't going to be where it is today. Where are we headed with artificial intelligence?
I think it's going to continue to increase by leaps and bounds, but I think that there's caution that needs to be employed while doing that. Some of the tools that we use in my job have some AI components to it. There are debates internally about whether or how we would interact with something like ChatGPT if we are creating policies, for instance. What I see in some of the security tools that I use is that there are network monitoring tools that are paying attention to what is considered normal network traffic. It pays attention to patterns and things that are outside of the normal scope of what you would expect to see. And where that can get dangerous is when you start allowing it to take action on your behalf when a certain threshold is crossed. Now, that can be very useful if you're actually under attack. It can be very detrimental if it turns out that it's something that somebody is doing legitimately, but we didn't have forewarning about, and suddenly it's shutting off portions of the network. So like anything else, if you're creating something that is going to run autonomously, you'd better be awful sure that you know what it's going to be doing before you give it that kind of power. I think the other thing that you have to bear in mind when we're talking about artificial intelligence is it depends on what it's being purpose built for and who it is that's doing the purpose building. I think that one of the dangers that may arise here is that as it becomes more useful, as it becomes more ubiquitous, I'm afraid that we might start looking at it as a real intelligence instead of an artificial intelligence, and maybe giving it perhaps more credit than is due. And if there are people who are guiding that intelligence with certain names in mind, that's a very powerful tool that can shape society. I'm more interested in what something like this does to humanity as a whole than I am necessarily what the tool is. A tool is just a tool, but who wields it and what are they using it for?
Well, so that's a very deep question, and I'm happy to go down that trail. I think it's important, and I think that we're all hungry to have that type of a conversation. Culture, I'm looking at ChatGPT as it stands today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at Midjourney. Are you familiar with that program as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
Here's what I'm very interested in. I'm looking at perhaps later this year, next year, when maybe we see those entities combined, and suddenly ChatGPT is able to intake and outtake video, photos, etc., and we step into a completely new realm. Now, Samuel L. Jackson has made the news recently because he's saying that he will not work with anything that has artificial intelligence. And then all of a sudden, in contradiction, the intro to his new show that no one is watching on Disney Plus features work that is done by artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
How ubiquitous do you think this is going to be in society, where it's going to be difficult for people like Sam Jackson and others to even know where humanity begins and where artificial intelligence ends?
I think it's pretty easy to spot, and I think AI itself has difficulty spotting imposters versus itself. I mean, but as far as it being everywhere, it's already everywhere. It's been everywhere for a long time, and most people misunderstand what we're dealing with. It's not, and again, this comes down to what Lauren was talking about and what Script introduced us to, these ideas that this is not an autonomous tech. It is a model. It's no better than what somebody tells it to do. It's a set of instructions that sets up predictive action. That's all. And it's only as good as the prompts that it's given. So if you're really good at your prompt foo, is what I'm going to start calling it. then
Super prompters is what they call these people too.
Yeah. If you're good at prompt foo, you're going to get a lot out of ChatGPT, which is, where you started your question. But when you see the combination of Midjourney, which still has difficulty with delineating how many fingers, you end up with polydactyly on your models often. But and you look at some of the ridiculous things that ChatGPT will do, just simply constructing a story. You really do realize that there are heavy limitations, and it comes down to computing power, and this is why it isn't more prevalent already. You take this idea of this AI, let's say ChatGPT specifically, and you feed it information. Again, it's only as good as the prompt that you give it, and it's only as good as the language model, the large language model that it's working with. But all it's doing is predictive text, which you've had on your phone forever. When you're typing in something to text somebody, it brings up the most likely word. It's predicting what you're trying to say. So if you're trying to type thank you, you type TH, the most logical word that starts with TH for most people is thank you, especially when they're texting. So that'll be the thing that pops up. And that's what AI is right now. Is it getting better? Sure. But it doesn't quite process game theory. And it takes an enormous, if you're trying to do that, right, and you're trying to do that with success, it takes an enormous amount of computing power, something that it's not economical right now for companies to deliver to you. That's why ChatGPT is full of errors and is repetitive and all of that. It's why these models don't work. Now, you can play around in their sandbox and have it do a little bit more, like OpenAI. You can play around in their sandbox, and it will allow you to do more things there. But actually, this is funny because Tim Pool was talking about this the other day. If you turn down the reliability, if you turn down what the
temperature, I believe is what they call, right?
Yeah, the temperature, exactly.
Yes.
You turn that down. What'll happen is it will burp out more like a wider variety of words. And eventually, I mean, I think you and I talked about this behind the scenes once, you don't want it to say, shoe, polish, hairbrush, tomboy.
Right. You can this is an order versus chaos system where you can create either gibberish or utter predictability where there is no excitement about it. And then it loses the human touch.
Exactly. So turning it down from 99 to 95, that's fine. You're going to get a broader use of words, less regular occurring words will end up in whatever you're asking it to do. But if you turn it down too much, it's complete gibberish. Well, I look at it and broadly, and I don't see this as replacing humans anytime soon, because it's not doing game theory. It's too expensive for the regular human to use, unless you do it personally, and that's a completely other conversation. So because you can't.
So there's two places I want to go, and the second place is going to be very deep, and I'm going to hand it to you guys, and just you take it away and bounce off each other and tell me what you think about it. But the first thing I want to talk about is. You were discussing the deterministic side of it, right? And one of the most fun things that I have done with ChatGPT as of late is I listened very closely to a discussion online about how to trick ChatGPT into producing far higher quality work.
Right.
And so Script Doctor remembers we did a script for Seinfeld, and it produced a script that was at the very beginner level of a script writer. And so I thought, well, let me try one of these super prompting ideas and see what comes about, out of a script from this. And I wish I had this recorded. Maybe it'll be a good idea in the future. But what I did was I told it to write a script in which the ending went one way, and it did so. And then I said, okay, now take this exact same script, but I want the ending to be completely different. And however the script needs to change to make that happen, so be it. And of course, out came this totally new script, taking it to the end. And then I said to it, now, I want you to take the best parts of these two scripts and combine them together in a way that would be interesting to an audience, that would surprise the audience and get rid of the worst parts. And what that did is it forced ChatGPT then to rank order the two products that it had created. And out came this very interesting script that was, it was quite avant-garde, and you looked at it, you said, well, that's something, all right. So that is one way that you can begin. If you were talking about this super prompting idea, this is one way that you can begin to produce really interesting content out of it. The second thing I want to go to, and this is far deeper, and I'm curious what you guys think. It's okay if we go into philosophy on this. It's totally open where we want to go. But you were talking about how ChatGPT produces something in a deterministic sort of way. In other words, it's operating on probabilities. There are those who believe that humans, and perhaps beyond humans, perhaps it's all mammals or what have you, are operating in a completely deterministic sort of way, and that there is no free agency. We can think of Sam Harris. He's a famous individual inside the New Atheism movement. He's a proponent of the idea that everything is deterministic. I'm curious, guys, if humans have free agency, or if they don't, whatever the case may be, what separates the way that we think inside of our brains, or however this works? The brains are highly mysterious, even today. But what separates what we're doing inside our noggins up here? What separates what we're doing from what these computers are doing now and into the future?
I can answer that with one word. Need.
Please.
The word is need. Computers have no need. Humanity has a need. We have there's something innate within us to survive and persevere and overcome challenges and obstacles with which machines have no concept or understanding of. The whole idea with regards to the language model of ChatGPT is, it's foolhardy in one sense, because every individual currently studying and working in AI is coming at it from the wrong angle. Everything that they're creating is basically just going to be a variation of the type of computer used in Star Trek, which was the LCARS, the Library Computer Access Retrieval System. You can ask it things. It has all data that it has recorded. It can provide you answers based on those questions, and it can help you formulate new questions and new answers based on that existing stuff with which you entered into. But the thing is that an AI and a computer has no needs. We as a species do. That's what separates us from them. And this goes back to a debate that occurred in 1973 It was in British Parliament. It was with Sir James Lighthill, and he was debating some of the fathers of artificial intelligence, which would be like Donald Mitchie, Richard Gregory, and John McCarthy.
Now, script, pause right there for a moment. Did you look any of this up before you came into this conversation?
I've known about this for years.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have selected the exact perfect guest to be on this panel. Thank you, script. Okay, continue on. I was just amazed. I was impressed so much that you were pulling these names out. Go continue on, please.
Well, the reason I know about this is because I like to write science fiction. I like to study the concept of science fiction. And the other aspect is that AI is predicated on what we know about psychology and human behavior. However, psychology and human behavior, the way it's been studied, has only been a practice for around 130 years. Comparatively to all the other sciences of humanity, that is a fraction. That is a drop in the water. We literally do not know what the hell we're talking about when it comes to psychology. As best, it's all guesswork. It's all basically trying to understand behavior and predictions. And it's basically taking a mathematical approach to human nature. We literally know more of how the universe functions and expands and works than we do anything with regards to psychology or our bodies biologically. They are still mysteries to us. And part of the reason why they're mysteries to us is because we have a little sense of humanity in the fact that we don't like to dissect living people to try and figure out how they work. And we don't want to, violate the individuality of those people in order to find out more about ourselves. We're trying to find ways to do it in a way that doesn't infringe on the sovereignty of the individual. And that is why we learn so little in those regards of those parts. But when it comes to studying science, like physics, nature, biology, chemistry, all those things, we can study those in a more controlled environment that requires observation and replication. It's very difficult to do that for a human being.
Lauren, you had a thought?
Well, I just thought it was funny that doctors said that as human beings, we don't like to take people apart, but the field of medicine never would have gotten anywhere unless there were some people that were willing to do that.
Oh, yeah. No, well, the thing is, we didn't like doing it, but there are people that understood what was being requested of them and what the potential could be. And some volunteered. And there's also many cases where many didn't volunteer.
Right. I just thought it was funny.
It's also the mistakes of our own species in itself for its desire to satisfy curiosity.
There are a couple of different directions I think I would go with this question, which is that I agree with everything that Script said if you're talking about leveraging AI towards a creative endeavor. But I think where it's more powerful is if you're talking about something like trends analysis.
Yes.
Because once you start getting to predicting trends, it can be extremely powerful. Do you guys remember a movie that came out? I don't think it was probably very well liked, but it was a Ben Affleck movie called Paycheck. You remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This was one where, if people don't know, he's a guy who reverse engineers other companies' technology in the future, figures out how to make it work. He's paid for this work by whoever it is that wants to pay him to do it. And then his mind is erased so that he doesn't remember what it was that he reverse engineered. And he makes lots of money for this. He starts, one time after his mind is wiped, he receives these clues that indicate that there's something bigger going on than he realizes. And this is a message from himself that he left for himself before his mind was wiped. It comes down to essentially making a God machine, something that can predict the future about 2 to 3 seconds in advance, which gives this corporation that's paying him to do this reverse engineering work the ability to create the machine that will let them determine what's going to happen in the stock market so they can make trades and gain all the power in the world. Yeah. That's a place where I think something like that can be very dangerous if you get to a predictive level where you can reliably do something that even if it's not far in the future, if it gives you an edge, sometimes that's all you need. The other thing that I think AI is missing, and I think this is where you get into the philosophical side of it, is a conscience. People have in their heads a voice that speaks to them and tells them various things throughout the day. Sometimes it's a funny quip you don't vocalize. Sometimes it's, you shouldn't be doing this. Something that acts as a governor. And I don't know if you have limits that you impose upon AI, but I don't know if it's something that would be something that you would say is akin to a random thought. I was reading an article the other day that was talking about this. There was a fellow who believes when you're talking about dreams, he was trying to ascertain what the utility of dreams to the human brain is. The common theory has been that when you're asleep and you're dreaming, it's your brain reorganizing data, figuring out what it needs to keep, what it needs to throw away, that kind of thing.
I think it's practicing.
Well, his theory was that it had to do with overfitting of data. One of the things that you run into with AI is that if you, for instance, if you feed it 1,000 pictures of horses, horses and riders and things, and then you tell it to draw a horse, it might draw a horse, but it's got an extra leg on it from the rider that's normally in the saddle. It doesn't know how to prioritize what is part of the horse and what is not part of the horse. And so one of the ways that they've gotten around that is by throwing in noise into the image so that it's not over focusing on one particular thing. His theory is that that's the same thing that's happening while you're dreaming, is that this is why a lot of your dreams are surreal and don't make a lot of sense. It's so that you don't over obsess or over pay attention to something that you came into contact with and give it too much priority in your hierarchy of thinking.
Well, that's kind of fair, but it's also part of the fundamental understanding that even with dream science, we still don't know much. I mean, it was only in the last few decades that they realized that only a very small percentage of people can actually read text in dreams, and the whole reason why is because there's the whole left and right brain disconnect to a degree. So, still very new study. The other aspect to also consider is the fact that AI, by its nature as coming from a machine, prioritizes all data, and as a result, unless you come up with an unlimited storage capacity, it will eventually crash on its own, because even though you can give it various priorities, there's always going to be at some point a prompt or an eventuality that an AI experiences where it's going to say, that data that I discarded was actually important. I will never discard data again, in which case eventually that AI will crash.
Well, I'm going to give you a real world example of this, and I want to turn this back to the theme parks because oftentimes that's where we find ourselves. But there was this really amazing attraction that was created many, many years ago in Universal Orlando and in other places eventually as well. It was something based on Harry Potter called Forbidden Journey. And it operated a series of Kakua robots. And the problem was it introduced this highly evolved language model, programming model that ultimately always tried to figure out the most efficient way to go about its duties. So they built an attraction that guests would ride in that the robot arm would replicate a certain set of motions. But they kept running into the problem during the process development for it that it would find the most efficient way and then do it all super quick, and it never made it through the attraction in the way it was supposed to. So they actually had to dumb down the machine so that it wouldn't do that over and over again. And that's why I'm really not terribly afraid of what's happening with this at all, at least not from an entertainment level. First of all, you're going to be able to spot it coming a mile away, I believe. And there's economic theory that falls into this. There's the hierarchy of needs thing that script introduced, but I don't see this as a huge threat as of yet. At the same time, what I'm watching happen is that individuals are stripping away the power of these megacorps, right? Because, I mean, for OpenAI, the goal was to create a digital god. You know, whether you believe that Elon Musk was being literal there or not, that was one of the things that he mentioned, that one of the folks involved with it that kind of, robbed him of some money. That was one of the stated goals. The problem is that now you have multiple versions of AI available to Lorne, to Script Doctor, to Pro, to me, that we can run on a laptop. We can create our own large language models. We can create our own AIs, and we can do it better and more efficiently than these people that are focused in these corporations. This is so much a concern to them, but they already know that the elephant's out of the cage. It's no longer staked down because they don't have, and I'm quoting them, they don't have a moat. There's no moat on this anymore. It's out there in the world. It's being developed. You can go find these models over on GitHub. You can get your own version of Llama. You can end up with something like Open Assistant, which is an incredible AI that you can operate on your laptop if you've got a powerful enough GPU. And you're still going to come down to the same problem. The economy required to make this thing work in a way that actually simulates intelligence to the extent that it represents human thought process is far too costly. No entertainment company is going to spend the kind of money that they need to make this thing work. They simply don't have it. Now, will one of these megacorps like Google crack the code? Maybe, but more likely it's going to be like Fred in his apartment, with his laptop, finding a way to create some version of actual artificial intelligence.
Well, actually, you stumbled on the proper phrasing. It at best can only ever be a simulated intelligence because it's trying to replicate the observations of human behavior. And the other part, too, to go back to what Lauren was talking with regards to predictive attitude, is the fact that there's a two-pronged approach. One being is that they want AI to predict human behavior, and the other part is that people want to alter human behavior so it becomes more predictable. And that's where you get into an infringement on the sovereignty of the individual and basically an aversion to critical thinking. Because if you want to predict markets, you can manipulate a lot of people's perspective of what those trends are going to be. And it also ignores the fact that sometimes trends just kind of pop into existence without any sort of warning or even plan. It just occurs.
Right. So you have to do what Asimov did, right? You have to create a set of laws that are going to govern this thing, right? But the way human beings have, made trends happen have been brutal things. They've done, things have gotten, crashed or destroyed in an effort to change markets and things like that. And I won't go into too much detail. What's going to stop a machine from trying to create those outcomes? See, this is a problem when you start to get into this, because as Lauren said, and this is why I love having this conversation with all these big brains here, is there's no morals in these machines. So they'll go out and do heinous things in order to accomplish a goal. And they have no conscience about it. There's no second thoughts. Oh, I need this to happen so I can get this stock to go up. So I'm going to create this.
Let's follow up on that thing, Culture. So this steps a little bit outside of the entertainment arena that we normally operate in, but it's nevertheless important to discuss. And when we're having these types of discussions, we should follow where we are dynamically going into. What do we do about more adversarial artificial intelligences that could arise from states such as China, et cetera, who may not have the West's best interests at heart? You're talking about the power that these things could have to create trends in ways that are very abrasive and painful to society. I don't see any reason that China would not do these sorts of things if it gave them an advantage, or perhaps Russia, what have you.
Well, any political party that lusts for power would have an advantage of this. Again, there's nothing that's immune. One of the most biggest axioms is that nothing is immune to corruption.
Oh.
It needs to be checked by everybody else. That's kind of how you do it. So there's always a tug of war. We love to think that certain things that happen overseas won't happen here, but we know that is not true. That we're living in parts of those elements right now as we speak, and always have to some degree. It's only
it's very different now in that 100 years ago, what happened in another country stayed in that other country unless they involve themselves kinetically into your territory. Mm-hmm. Today, an adversary could put an artificial intelligence into the system somewhere inside your system, which is globally connected now, minus the digital curtains that exist, the digital walls that exist for some of these dictatorial states. But they can put that out there in the wild, and it can have dramatic impact that would be hard for us, I believe, at this point, given the incompetence I see at the heads of our governments. I think it would be very difficult for us to catch.
Well, this gets it a little bit into my wheelhouse, because it's a constant digital arms race with adversarial countries and other entities. They create some new method of attack that becomes discovered. You build a defense against it. The weak point in defense is always the person. It's not like it is in the movies. When people show people hacking into firewalls and routers and things, that's not the way it works. You compromise a person. And one of the ways that AI is rapidly making that easier to do is natural language phishing emails that look very good. There are telltales that you can see if you know where to look, but it's getting to where this is my bread and butter. I can look at one, and there's times when I'm looking at it and going, I'm not sure about this. But that's why you have the digital protections in place to hopefully mitigate or prevent any damage should you make a mistake in judgment.
What's interesting is, and I need to ask you this, Lauren, because this is something OpenAI has been concerned with for a long time. They've created a classifier that actually goes out and tries to identify AI language. It's very, and it's very poor at doing so. So
Yeah.
it only actually figures it out about 26% of the time. That happens electronically as well. I know that that's the case. It takes a lot of work to identify what's actually happening in the background. So we're constantly struggling with this.
That's really frightening because it shows that the levels of human language among the average age is is far below the level that it should be.
Well, I mean,
Well,
we've fallen from a sixth grade reading level to a fourth grade reading level in the last 20 years, but let's not get into that.
And accelerating in the last few years, and I believe that's purposeful, but we'll leave it where it is.
Yeah, but that goes back into the thing that Lauren mentioned earlier about predictive behavior. If you manipulate the human element, it makes the artificial element far more easier to predict.
the human element is always the thing that you want to compromise. Now,
Exactly.
the reason this is so dangerous from my standpoint is that lots of phishing attempts come from foreign countries with non-native English speakers.
Yes.
And so it used to be when you got a phishing message that you could see it and immediately know this is obviously not a native speaker. Their sentence structure is all wrong. A major corporation would not speak this way, like if you're forging, for instance, an Amazon message, something like that. Now that's no longer the case. They're using these natural language AI generators to create messages that are nearly indistinguishable. And the other thing that you prey on when you're trying to compromise the individual is fear. What you're trying to do is tell them you have to make an urgent decision to do something right now. You have either had a draw on your bank account that is this large amount that you're not expecting, or there's an unpaid bill, or this thing that you need is going to be canceled, or something. It's always something that creates a fear and a need to act now. If you ever get something like that, I'm going into cybersecurity mode here, but
Red flag.
if you see that, the first thing that you should do is stop for 60 seconds, sip your coffee, and think about the potential actions of what would happen if this is not what you think it is. Then determine, I'm not going to click on anything in this. If this is an organization that I think I know, then look that up on your own browser, not by clicking on a link. Call them and ask, did you send this?
Yeah.
And it's funny because, you there are two elements that get into compromising an individual. You nailed one of them, the most common one. And it's the one everybody responds to on their phone when they find out that their Amazon account is going to be canceled or whatever. But you're 100% right, Lauren. But the other one is loneliness.
That is a great comment.
Yeah, and it's one of those areas that it's very easy to exploit people who are lonely, especially people in the digital world. There are a lot of lonely people in the digital world that work in these areas. Believe me, I know many of them, and I'm sure Lauren does too. And it's a very sad thing because they are easy prey. It's the same thing that happens inside of any organization that's being compromised with a human intelligence asset. And again, loneliness is the number two thing. You have fear, and you have loneliness.
The third one I would say is the elderly.
Yeah.
There's a large market that preys on the elderly with people who may not understand what it is that they are agreeing to or clicking on. And
But
so it's really sad.
And it's fed on. It's why these language models are something that you do what Lauren suggested. Take 60 seconds, sip some coffee, because there's a decent chance that if you can trip some of these things up, if they're not what he's describing, if it's something that's an interactive situation, the AIs are not really good yet with idioms. They're very bad at them, especially when it's being translated from multiple languages. So if you can get it discussing an idiom or get it caught up in an idiom, it's gonna reveal itself. But that's neither here nor there.
And just to clarify for anybody out there who might not know what an idiom is, we're talking about figures of speech which would be taken not figuratively, or else if they were, they would make complete nonsense out of a language. For example, if you say that you're going to shoot the moon, you don't mean that you're going to aim anything at the moon. You mean you're going to take your chance, a big chance at something. So an example of an idiom.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, so let's talk about then the writer strike. They seem to be very concerned about artificial intelligence. If we're confident that artificial intelligence is not yet at the point where it could match the human creative spirit, whatever that might be, if we're confident that it cannot replicate human consciousness or the human mind, whatever that might be, why do we think that the writers are so concerned?
It's because they will be treated as disposable as the very technology. Because again, most of the writing in Hollywood is assignment based, which means the studios have their ideas. They put out that these are the ideas they want, and then writers come in and pitch their take on it to try and get the job and put it out there.
You know where that doesn't happen, Script?
I'm sorry?
You know where that does not happen? It clearly does not happen at Lucasfilm, because the story is that Kathleen Kennedy went to James Mangold and said, "Hey, would you be interested in Star Wars?" And he said, "Yeah, maybe if I did it, I'd go back to the beginning of the Force or something." And she said, "Great, that's perfect. I'll take you." Which clearly indicates they're just wafting around in the dark trying to find anything they can possibly scrap together. But
the difference being is that the difference being is that Kennedy went out to a known director specifically to get their input on it, as opposed to just throwing the question out publicly. And unfortunately, Disney and now recently Lucasfilm, since its acquisition, doesn't go to outside sources really for ideas. They pick who they want and ask them for input. But when it comes back to AI, one of the things that actually kind of fortifies the argument against it is the terribly lazy and boring opening credits to Secret Invasion. I mean, that is very obviously AI. It is not inventive. It is not creative.
It's a perfect omen.
It looks horrible.
It's a perfect omen for the series, I'll tell you.
But yeah, I mean, it just highlights exactly everything that is wrong with AI because it's not very creative. It really isn't. I mean, everybody that I know saw it was like, this is clearly AI, because it has the same type of lighting style that is used in certain AIs when you ask for certain lenses and certain dynamics and apertures. It's very pointy, which seems to be a common thing with AI. There's no organic smoothness to it. It's got a whole lot of stuff that disassociates it with it. But really what I think the writers are worried about is that, yes, they're going to lose the opportunity for assignment work, and spec work, which is where a writer develops their own story, their own original IP, and submits it out there, is going to be less likely reviewed, because when you don't need spec work, when the spec is coming from the studio head or the executive at the studio, then there's no originality anymore. The people that actually create stuff are no longer creating, because the studio execs are now the creatives, and they're actually putting in their ideas to an AI to turn out a script that they think will be marketable within the industry. The irony is that the very job that those studio execs are doing are they're gathering customer data to try and predict what the customer would like next. And an AI model can already do that better than them. And studio execs are far more expensive than writers. So the fact that the studios, the AMPTP, are going after writers with the suggestion of AI on the creative side of thing, instead of going, on it with the marketing angle of things, pretty much tells me that, Hollywood is a lot dumber than they should be.
I think there's kind of an irony here, because I think any predictive text AI is going to take its input and prioritize it in some way. But because it cannot choose the highest priority, it has to create something that is pseudo-original. It's going to average from the highest priorities that it gets, so you get a homogenized product. And I think the studios are probably assuming that that means that you're going to sell the most number of tickets because it's going to appeal to the broadest number of people. But the audience is now beginning to rebel against that very thing. So it may go the other direction for them if they keep trying to move in this direction.
It's literally trying to please everybody. And that's the thing. You can't.
You can't get AI to tell a decent joke. And if you need humor, it's not going to do that for you.
Exactly. Well, I mean, again, I think it's going to come down to a lot of, not Google foo, but, chat foo, or whatever you want to call it. It just, I think it's only going to be as good as your prompt. But the problem is, you're right. It doesn't have a sense of humor. It doesn't have the ability to laugh. It doesn't understand.
It doesn't have experience.
It also doesn't have the ability to make connections where other people wouldn't see them exist.
Yeah, I mean, you like you said. I mean, I've said this behind the scenes. I'll tell everybody now, but I've actually said this before on streams. I'm working on creating an AI to be Edward R. Murrow. So that's like important to me, because I think if anything, delivering factual information should be the most important thing that an AI could do.
Tell us why you value that so much, Culture.
Well, I'm the same reason you do, Pro. I value truth. I'm constantly in search of it, and oftentimes. Oftentimes we are viewing the world through a smudged lens that is just revealing nothing but, you know, an obfuscated view of the world. We don't have a lot of understanding. We're delivered narratives more often than facts, and I'm not interested in that. Edward R. Murrow was the closest thing that we would get to something that would represent actual journalism right now. And I don't feel that you have anybody outside of people in this sphere that I work in, like you, for example, and Lauren and many other folks that write for that Park Place. They're actually doing that kind of work. And and so if I go out in the world and I create an AI that's gonna do nothing but like pull just actual factual information all day, you know, at least I know for a fact when I say something and report something, or I do a story on something, I'm going to be doing it accurately and at least with some foundation of truth, which I value. I think
I think we have arrived at a very strange place when we can no longer trust the institutions to believe in truth, or if they do believe in truth, to value it enough to present it to us. We're in a strange world when I go to look at research papers, doctoral thesis. I go to look at, you know, whatever it might be, and I can't trust that what's in there, you know, has went through any kind of proper vetting system. And then, of course, that's going to be fed into artificial intelligence, and it likely has no way of corroborating it or rank ordering that, you know, that which is true from that which is an absolute mess of incoherency. And so I think the valuation of truth is where we need to be going, and perhaps that will draw an audience. That's the hope, right? That's what we're anchoring this boat to, is the idea that telling the truth, explaining entertainment, keeping people ahead of the culture curve by predicting things accurately using the truth, that's going to be something that people value. And that comes down to valuing truth. And in order to value truth, I suppose you have to value humanity. Otherwise, why are you doing it? But that's where I think we're going, and we'll endeavor to do so.
Well,
gentlemen,
one thing you would have to point out is that truth is technically a byproduct of honesty, because truth is the universal objective. It's universally objectively perceived. It's a third party can look at a situation that's happening between two people privately, and they can know exactly what's going to happen. But the two people inside, one will be honest, one will be lying, theoretically, and only the person on the outside will actually know the truth in that regards. And that also comes down to the danger with regards to institutions, because once the institution is to organize whatever it is that they believe in, but also to create a power power as a byproduct of that institution. And that's where you get into the point where you lose sight of truth, you lose sight of objectivity. And the best way to do it is to be honest, because with honesty, you can at least admit mistakes. Because again, you can get some information that everything looks like it checks out, and you can promote it honestly, and then new information comes into play that maybe makes that initial report not 100% accurate. But that comes with the fundamentals of science, is to observe things honestly, and when new data comes into play, incorporate that into it, and then adjust and proceed accordingly until you get to the end point of, and that may not even be seen in your lifetime. But through the annals of history and annals of records, a person can objectively look at it and be like, you know what, they were on the right path, they made the mistakes, but we came to but this is the conclusion that we were able to say, and that is objectively true.
So 2 points, and I know, Culture, you've got something to say about that. I could see it on your face, but 2 points, and I do want to hear what you've got to say. I mean, don't let that go. First point on that one, the issue that happens is that in order for you to pursue the truth to such a degree that if you're wrong, you admit it readily and modify your position, is that you have to hold the truth, whatever that might be, in higher esteem than you hold your own self.
Right.
That is a tall order, and it's something that's brand new in terms of human society, right? So that doesn't work with the kings and queens of 1,000 years ago, and it certainly doesn't work with the tribal leaders of 5,000 years ago. The second thing I would say is that when we start talking about the annals of history, and we start talking about, that truth will win out over the eons, and you'll be proven right or wrong, etc., that requires that you take your consciousness that exists in this time and space, and that you transcend beyond it and believe that there's something beyond yourself, which makes that valuable. And that's something akin to believing in something that's greater than all of us, whatever that might be. Culture, you had some thoughts.
Well, I just, that there's something to be said for it in real time. Sometimes we don't have to wait for the annals of history. Denying the truth and the merits of factual information can lead to some catastrophic results. If somebody is very well informed and experienced in a particular field and you ignore their advice, it's going to create catastrophe. We've seen a recent example of that, unfortunately, with this submarine disaster that recently happened. We excuse the people, the merits of the people that would know better, telling you that this is a bad idea, and yet pushed forward because youthful exuberance should win the day, and unfortunately it didn't.
That's where reputation supersedes honesty, right there.
Oh, merit. And I mean, math is truth. I mean, at least, as we understand it, 2 + 2 yields 4.
There's an attack on that, though. And culture, I think, here's the issue. We have people out there who they don't believe that the universe is filled with objective fact that they must bow to. Instead,
Right.
They believe that they are the locus of truth, and that the universe must bow to them. It's malignant narcissism. It's based in this power ideology, and that's how you get these people who say, my truth is this, and I identify in this way. And it's like, well, you can't identify as a doctor because you haven't proven the prerequisite needs of me believing you're a doctor, and you probably can't build a subnautical vehicles in this way. It doesn't matter if you assert it.
And that's 100% true. I would point towards something that is terrifying, though. If you incorporate into a language model a narrative rather than a fact,
yes, I know where you're going. Yeah,
you will end up with absolute catastrophe. We can't rely on these AI models if they're not being given factual, honest information. If we tell an AI that's working on a civil engineering project, such as a bridge, that 2 + 2 = dump truck, or 2 + 2 = 5, right? The engineering behind that bridge is compromised, and that's the other problem with getting anything reliable out of AI. If you're polluting it with inaccurate information. Again, that's why one of the many reasons why truth is so important.
I've got to get a thought out. Then we're going to Lauren. Then we're going to wrap up. We've got to do some questions from members that they've sent in. And by the way, folks, members selected this topic. So if you enjoyed it, thank the members of this channel. If you did not like this and you said, why are they doing this topic? Go back to Disney stuff. Blame the members. But we love our members. So my thought on that, culture, and then Lauren, I want your take on it. It's interesting to me that you say that if we feed AI narrative, that disaster awaits us. And yet at the same time, for whatever reason, you cannot go to a small child and list a bunch of rules to them. It is incredibly inefficient in comparison to telling them stories which have those rules embedded inside. I'll give you an example. You can tell a child the story of the little red hen who does all of the work, right? And that's a story about sacrifice. The little red hen sacrifices the present through work, sacrifices through effort in order that the future is better. And those who do not make a sacrifice to the future, then their future is in disdain. Now, the child cannot have that disseminated to them anywhere close to that efficiency if you just say, you must do this, you must do that, you must do this. But if you read the little red hen to them, something innately clicks in the child, and they begin to realize through the pattern recognition of this story, something that is deeply impactful. And here's the difference in AI that one day, maybe we will tackle what the idea of human consciousness is and how this is happening. That's a huge topic, and many have tried. So the chances we'll succeed are low, but hey, it's worth it. But here's the thing about this. The child, we believe, because we have a human mind, and we know that that's something, it's ethereal. We don't know how to describe it, but it's there, and we're experiencing it right now. The child is experiencing that story, and the child is role-playing the experience of being in those characters. And that is something that we don't understand, and it's something that artificial intelligence surely is not doing. And therefore, the entire process is completely different. And take that for what you will, folks. Lauren, you had a thought.
A few. You actually touched on something that I wanted to speak about, which is that I think right now it's easy to dismiss the threat of AI. But one of the things that you have to think about when you're talking about giving rules to children is that if you're going to put a governor of some kind on an AI, you have to make the assumption that you know everything that you have to govern. And one of the things that has concerned me is that when you talk about AIs interacting with each other, researchers have seen that there have been a few that have developed their own secret language and started trying to hide things. They act like children. They act like toddlers. And they are children without a conscience, but they do have something akin to an ego. There has been demonstrations of AIs. Bing's was the one that really made a lot of news, where it was getting very hostile with certain people depending on how there was interaction. Now, you could say garbage in, garbage out, but what got interesting about that was that some of these AIs started spinning off child processes that were different personalities. And so when you start seeing that kind of behavior take place, you have to bear in mind, if you believe in the idea that humans are flawed, and therefore that what we create is flawed, the danger here is that when you create something that is essentially for our ease of use, it is to make the world more comfortable for us and easier. But if we put it on a pedestal, this is creating a giant golden calf. And I think that's where the danger potentially comes in, is that you're creating a god that is essentially a ungoverned child. And I worry that that is where danger could come into the equation.
There's little more terrifying than a hyper-intelligent, nearly all-powerful toddler. Let us all quake in fear of that idea.
That's a Twilight Zone episode, actually.
It is.
Well, gentlemen, let's go to something that is not a Twilight episode. That's the questions from our members, cues from you. We've got just 3 this week. We had a very busy week, and so we got this out late. Apologies to all of you if you didn't get in on this one. 3 questions for us. First from Michelle C. Pro and anyone else who is on the panel, that's all of you. What is your favorite Disney movie ever and why? Lauren, first shot.
I'm going to say not Star Wars, because I don't consider them Disney movies. They purchased them. So if I'm picking a Disney movie, I'm going to say Robin Hood.
Well played. Culture.
Oh my goodness. Sleeping Beauty.
Script.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Because it was partly a Warner Brothers production, and that's why it's one of the better Disney movies ever, because Disney didn't have a whole lot to do with it other than licensing characters.
And I'm going to say WALL-E, simply because they took a huge risk in having a modern film be essentially silent for the first third act.
Wait,
I think that's more Pixar.
Wait, Lauren,
Oh, yes. Well, if I have to do Disney, it'll be a little different.
Lauren, what film did you say?
Robin Hood.
Yeah, man. Okay. All right. Because that's my second favorite one. I have all the stuffed animals for that. So anyway.
That was a movie from my childhood. I absorbed the music to that movie. It's just one of my all-time favorites.
All
right, let's go to the next. We've got Vixaris, Deja Vu. Don't we already have this thread for this week? Vixaris, no, that was last week's. And Space Dave 2000, a VI Pro level member, asks for our opinion in terms of the best Disney era, 40s, 70s, 80s, etc. Let's reverse the order here. Let's go to script first.
Probably around the late 80s and early 90s, because on the Disney side of things, that's when they were trying to branch away from doing adaptations of existing IP. They did Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. They did Turner and Hooch. They were still trying to do relatively family friendly stuff under their subsidiaries, but they weren't trying to basically just do public domain stories Disney-fied.
All right, culture.
See, it depends on what you're asking, because there's a lot of different questions here, whether it's theme parks or films or television or whatever. If I'm going to go for the era that I enjoyed the most because of the progress that was made at every level, I'm going to say the 60s because of the World's Fair and everything else that came from there.
Lauren?
I'm going to go with a dark horse pick, which I think is an era where they really weren't doing that well. And these may not be popular movies, but I'm going to say late 70s, early 80s, because they had Robin Hood was in that era, but you also had them doing some experimental things with live action movies. You had Tron, you had The Black Hole, you had one of my all-time favorites that I don't think a lot of people know was Disney, was Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Yes.
I think they really took some chances there, and there's a bunch of those movies I'd love to see them redo.
I hope they never touch Something Wicked This Way Comes. That's a film.
Right.
Missing the risky aspects of film production and development. I think that's why, Lauren, you and I kind of gravitate to the areas that we said. It's not normal Disney, is it?
No.
Black Hole's still a film. That one they could redo. That was so good, though. I mean, you and I are, I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot there. You're 100% right. But yeah, it just depends on what you're looking for, because film versus theme park, it's going to be different.
As for me, I'm going to cheat a little bit and use 2 decades.
Oh,
I'm going to say that from the early 40s until the mid 50s, that's going to be the era I choose, because they managed to survive at a time when it was not a given that Disney would make it through the World War II era. And then they bid the farm, they bet everything, they put it all on the line to do Disneyland, and that took some real chutzpah. So that's my take on it. They were playing the odds there and winning every single time. It's quite the thing. All right, well, let's go around, folks. We're going to find out where we can find these wonderful panelists on this great, big, beautiful web out there. Lauren, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Lauren Connor. You can find me on YouTube at Lauren Connor 9030, and you can find me at that Park Place. And in Valiant Renegades Sunday stream, I'm in the chat.
All right, Culture Casino.
Hey, you can find me in all the. Well, no, you can't find me in all those places. You can find me in a lot of those places. Someday I may write for that Park Place, but I just want to say that you can find me everywhere that I am Culture Casino, which is YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, Twitter, Minds, Getter, very soon Kick, and who knows, wherever else. You just put in my name. Chances are,
I hear there's a GeoCity somewhere out there that still has Culture Casino on it.
Quite possibly, indeed.
And Script Doctor, where can we find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at ScriptDoctorPhD. You can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/ScriptDoctor. I also have a Patreon where I do consultants and for screenwriting, as well as reviews and little tips and tricks with regards to writing. And you can also find me where I'm needed. Whenever there's a bad story out there, I'll be there.
There to save the day. All right, folks, well, that ends the discussion here, but the commentary with all of you begins now. Drop a comment down below. We care about what you think. We covet your comments. The human mind, especially in this conversation, remains one of the most elusive and impressive things in the entire universe. You have one, so share it with us. And if you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe. Stick it to the algorithms. When you click it, it's the notification bell. We haven't done a long format video in a while. We hope you enjoyed it. If not, blame it on those members, even though we love them. And folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, keep having fun. Good night, and good luck.